This is the Converge Podcast, brought to you by the Converge Institute. Each week, brilliant minds specializing in AI, blockchain, and fintech come together to challenge the status quo and empower disruption. Sponsored by our founding council, Nakusa, BankSocial, the Texas Blockchain Council, and the Universal AI University.
Nice to meet you. Where are you at? Where are you located at?
I'm in Edgewater, New Jersey, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jersey at all, but
a little bit.
It's a little coastal town right across from the Upper West Side. So it's on the Hudson River on the Upper West Side. So there's like George Washington Bridge, runs into Fort Lee. That's on the Jersey side. You go down this little hill, and that's Edgewater.
So it's you said up near the Upper West Side, across from the Hudson, kind of a little quaint village, maybe.
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah,
way to describe it.
It's a little coastal town. Yeah, that's so. In Jersey, there's Fort Lee is the town that runs over the George Washington Bridge. You know, then it goes to Washington Heights. So on the Jersey side, Fort Lee, you go down this big hill where the cliffs are, and that's Edgewater. It's just this little 1.5 mile wide by 3 mile borough. It was actually featured in a movie in 1990. I think it was 1994. Maybe it was a little bit later than that. A really cool movie called Copland, if you've never seen it before.
No.
It's
it sounds kind of familiar, but who was in it?
It's a really, really good cast. So it's Sylvester Stallone, Harvey Keitel, Ray Liotta.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's a knockout cast, but it's a great story. So basically this like group of NYPD cops basically take over this town in New Jersey, and it was all filmed here in the 90s.
What'd they call the name of the city in the movie?
It's a really good question. It wasn't Edgewater. But I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. That's a good question. But it's neat to see kind of like that this town was sort of immortalized in a film, because it's very different looking now. You know, its developments sort of happen obviously everywhere, but really a lot here. But I hear a lot of stories from the old heads that still live here about what it used to be like. It was very industrial. But anyway, I digress. It's a cool little town. I'm not sure how much longer we'll be here, just because we want to try to expand our.
Who's we?
My wife and 2 kids.
Oh wow! How old are your kids?
I have a 7-year-old. She'll be 7 in a couple days, and then I have a 4-year-old son.
Oh, so you have a daughter and a son?
Yeah. Do you have kids?
I have 4 kids.
Nice. Good for you. All right, ages and what are they? Boys, girls, mix?
I've got 2 of each, so I've got 4. So girl, boy, girl. So they're not. My oldest is 9, about to be 10. My second 2 just turned 8 and 5, and then my last one is 2, about to be 3.
Oh wow, good for you, John. Jeez, that's a lot of small jam-packed energy. So
it's a lot of small jam-packed energy, and it's all kinds of energy too. It's it's masculine, it's feminine, and you don't know where it's coming from on what given point in time.
Now, are you a sibling, or are you? What's your?
I have a brother.
Okay, yeah. So you got experience. You got experience with what that sibling dynamic is like. I'm one of 4 boys, so I have a lot.
Oh wow!
So and then I had 2. My parents are separated, but I had 2 step siblings as well. So at one point in the house, there was 8 of us, which was kind of intense. So I definitely know what you mean about a lot of personalities. I was the youngest, even though I'm probably, I have an identical twin brother, so we're the tallest, but it doesn't matter with older brothers; they don't care.
Who's older of the 2? Who's older of the 2?
My twin brother is 6 minutes older, and he makes sure he remembers.
So you're really the youngest. You're he reminds you every day. You're really the youngest, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were created at the exact same time, so it's like
that's true. Hey, that's the exact point. Yeah, no, I think you win with that argument. Actually, I think you just found the twin dilemma problem. You solved it.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of like I said, a lot of experience with my brothers. competitively, both physically as well as you try to get every inch you can, you know?
Oh yeah. So did you grow up in Edgewater?
No, I didn't. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a town called. I moved around a little bit, just a little bit, but I spent my adolescent years in a really small little school district called Brandywine Heights, was in Pennsylvania. It's right next to Allentown. It's a little bit further west than Allentown, a little bit further east than Lancaster. It's a little bit kind of in the middle there. It's pretty rural, a lot of farmland, a lot of Mennonites, carriages, horse and buggies. I moved in that area when I was 12, so I went from like Easton, Pennsylvania, which is much more urban. I think it's a city of like 50,000, to basically an area where, you know, there was like 500 kids in the whole school. So it was very, very small. It was, you know, spending time like that in your adolescence, when there's not a whole lot to do is challenging, but I think it also creates a lot of opportunity for using your imagination. I moved to the area without, like, I went from private Catholic school, which is very structured, you know, very disciplined in terms of your regiment. Like, you know, everything's very laid out. You don't have to even pick your clothes, for example. Like, everything is, you wear the same uniform every day. You know, very.
There are efficiencies in that, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely respect and appreciate that. But, you know, at some point when, you know, especially for myself, I consider myself to be a creative person. It wasn't until I moved into this little area and I was picking actually my electives. I remember this moment vividly. I was picking my electives, which I never.
At what age? What grade? Like middle school?
I was 12 in seventh grade. So I was entering 7th grade, and first time going to public school. And I'm looking through, you know, all of the class. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm just like, what is that?
You're overwhelmed. You're like, oh my God, what is all this?
Yeah, but I remember reading a little paragraph about telecommunications, and I was like, what is this? You know, I read the little brief about it, something about.
How old are you, Tommy? Just so I could get a time frame here. When is this? Like 2005, 2002?
Yeah, this would be. I'm 36. This was 2000, and I graduated college in 2006. High school in 2006. So, you know, I would say that was 8 years.
98, 99, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Right. So, anyway, I read this little paragraph about telecommunications. I didn't really quite fully understand what it was, but I remember picking all my classes and taking maybe 20 steps and being like, you know what, I think I want to take that elective. I don't really know. It's something about video and audio. I don't know, whatever. So I picked a class and I stuck with it, you know, all through middle school and high school. But it was the first time that I was given an opportunity to just basically do anything, carte blanche. You know, they had a radio program where, like, you would set the morning news and you would talk about all the different aspects of the program, but it was really whatever the kids wanted to do. It wasn't super well funded. There wasn't really a lot of oversight in it. And then 2 years later, they built a high school. Might have been a couple of years after that, but they built a high school. And when they built the high school, they built like a little television studio, and they put cameras in there, and they put all kinds of switchers, and they had a little, like, it was kind of like a version of Premiere, but it was all inside of a box. I don't remember what it's called. But it was a form of editing. And that's where things really started to say, okay, now we're going to do like pre-recorded, you know, packages. We're going to go to the soccer field and do a thing. We're going to do some weather reports. And it really started to have more, okay, whatever you want to do, but there's certain structure.
Were there a lot of people in those classes with you, or was it small interest in the beginning when you were starting?
Yeah, that's a good question, John. The whole school is very small. As I mentioned, there was only about 500 kids in the high school, and I graduated, I think, with 100 and some odd. But everybody kind of touched everything a little bit. You know, there was no real, like, these are the jocks and these are the, you know, the artists. You had some of that, certainly a little bit, but for the most part, we all cross-pollinated. So that telecommunications program really grew in its size. I'd say there was a few dozen of us, but there was always.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, especially considering how small the school was.
Yeah. But what do your brothers do? So you went creative route. What do your brothers do?
Oh, good. So my eldest brother is he has a couple of jobs. He's in the Army Reserves and works for
Cool.
the DoD. He's been an army man his whole life. And the brother that's the middle one works in IT and healthcare. He's also very, very creative, but he's more like a puzzle. He likes solving puzzles, that kind of brain. And then my twin brother was a lobbyist, and then he just got done working with Senator Manchin. He's a policy advisor for energy. Manchin just retired, so my brother's on the hunt for his next adventure.
Oh man, he should talk to Kyle Hopman at the NCUA. He's looking for a policy advisor person.
Oh, yeah.
Down on the Hill. We should hook him up.
Yeah, Kyle Hopman's really good. He's the chairman. He just became the chairman of the NCUA, which is like the FDIC for credit unions.
Nice.
It's really powerful. It's a good org.
Nice. Yeah, we'll have to hook him up. Yeah, my brother just finished last week, so he's taking the kids to Disney World, and then he's gonna.
We should do it quick. He needs to do it quick because he's looking. He just he's the whole. I'm sure they'll take time to find somebody, but he should put his name in the hat quick.
Yeah, there's a lot of shuffling around. There's a lot of shuffling around.
Tons of shuffling around. So we've got kind of your origin story down.
Yeah.
Let's talk about so you went to college. It sounds like you went into the art route, but more art visual, like technology focused art, right? It sounds like you were a lot into computers early on.
I feel like technology is something it's always, we're just a technological generation. I'm not saying that, technology hasn't obviously been around for many, many different generations, but we're seeing the next generation who's grown up with smartphones. And I think that the generation, like the millennial generation, is really that transitionary sort of generation where we've experienced analog and we've also experienced digital. So yes, I've always been interested in technology, but I also have a real appreciation for analog. I'm not saying that I do, I'm not like an analog, nut. Like I have mad respect for musicians like, Trent Reznor, for instance, who are kind of purists. But I've always recognized that technology moves fast and it grows. I remember shooting on DV cameras. I went to college. I shot on a Bolex.
Well, a lot of time the analog inspires the digital rendition or the digital conversion. It's so you have to understand it in order to be able to improve on it or bridge the gap from the analog to the digital version.
Right. It all started analog, right?
Yeah, and I think to that point, John, is that not only has analog influenced, but it's the building blocks, right? Analog is always the building blocks. So let's take film, for instance, which uses emulsion to develop, the film. So that's now what we use for, there's film grain still in digital, but we use sensors and we're always trying to capture the same amount of pixels that happen in the chemical reaction. And we use the same terminology, like, we use cut and splice and paste and all these things that came from an analog, perspective. And that also filters just into how we work. I find this very interesting with development technology, but leadership is still the same as it used to be. Order of operations should still be the same. How we process and execute projects is still pretty much the same. And that's things we built upon through decades and generations of working with whatever technology we had at the time. I think as technology really advances, there's a little bit more of a breakdown in that structure and that workflow. I have a laptop I'm literally, in front of right now, which is more powerful than anything I worked on when I first started in this industry. And I could plug something in and cut 4K right now. And that's amazing, John. But I also notice that we have lost a little bit of that sort of structure, the hierarchy, the echelon, if you will. And not saying that there has to be, there's really talented people that are young and coming in. However, analog and working in that traditional sense has also created structure that I think the younger generation is not necessarily missing, but they should hopefully get, in some other way, because it's harder and harder to achieve that.
But yeah, the world changed kind of with, I don't know if COVID's had any impact on this, but it kind of changed there too, where that structure kind of went away, because a lot of these original or initial digital stuff, the early pioneers of digital art and computer generated art and kind of the early AI ML for art, right? Like what Pixar and Jobs and them were working on in those days. They did those in big offices all together working. There was a lot more structure. To your point, maybe grown-ups in the room is but it's coming around, right? We're starting to be the grown-ups in the room, and we lived through that. Like you said, the millennium is kind of the transition point for this next generation of not just innovators, but it's leaders as well, right? And that's the kind of the age and the shift that's happening right now. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, people can make things. We see this with, especially with AI. I know it's going to be a big topic we're going to talk about, but specifically with AI, there's the ability to produce a level of content that was, I mean, not even to say extremely more extremely difficult, but more expensive, more time consuming, what have you. And I'm not saying that it holds up a lot of the time, because in my opinion, it doesn't hold up a lot of the time, but it holds up sometimes enough. And there are brands that are clearly willing to embrace AI. I mean, look at the Coke ad that came out for the holiday thing. But that's also meaning that the younger generation who maybe understands how to prompt or encourage AI or whatever is now very competitive in the market in a way that,
Exactly.
And that's what dictates, right? Everything ultimate at the end of the day is who's the most, who's the cutting edge, who's the latest, who's going to get my brand the most awareness or whatever. And whether or not trickle down people understand, like, okay, yeah, that's a really great person or company, but they're too young or they're really whatever. Nobody even really cares anymore. It's all about, results. So I think it's tougher. It's tougher for younger generations to see and experience, what it means to be in like a proper production environment, and then to learn and to grow, because that took decades for myself, and I'm still learning and growing. And now, a brand could just go to an AI artist and say, make me a commercial.
And it's only going to get faster and faster, or the iterations are going to get, exponentially more dialed in. Just look at where we were 2 years ago and look at where we are now. It's just, what's interesting is that some people, I find myself when I talk to Siri, or early on when I used to talk to Siri, I felt like I had to talk to it different. I wouldn't just talk to it because it didn't feel natural and normal. And I think we're very quickly getting to a point where our kids, they're used to talking to these things. Like it dawned on me the other day, we were eating at a Chinese restaurant, and this little waiter thing, robot waiter, came around, and my kids love it. And they talk to it naturally, expecting a response. And soon these things are going to start talking back, and they're going to get used to just interfacing with robots, and almost like how there's some bias, or there's some misunderstandings that happen, but it's just the same as like talking to a person in a third party language that you kind of understand. You know how sentence structure needs to work ish. And I think this is going to be a very interesting time in transition period for, like you said, who takes advantage of AI and how some of that starts to really permeate. And I know you've done some work, right, with AI and video.
Yeah.
And for some big productions yourself, right?
Yes. I mean, you have to. Yeah, absolutely. And you have to. In fact, it's very interesting to me because a couple of years ago, there were companies that I work with that were extremely resistant to it, mostly from a legal perspective. They were like making sure that, hey, you're not using all this stuff because we don't know. And now they're encouraging it among their own staff. Aggressively encouraging.
The legal staff is now using it for reviewing papers and reviewing information. I mean, right? It is. We see it all the time.
Right. I mean, it really comes down to simple economics a lot of the time. I was just discussing this with my team earlier today. We were talking about AI. So you had mentioned, how your kids are interacting with AI, and I found this experience recently when I was working on a pitch and I was using ChatGPT to really help me ideate and to work through the structure. And I found language to be one of those main obstacles that I had to overcome when talking to it. It was kind of understanding me, but I couldn't talk to it like a.
That's my point. That's my point, right? You have to almost learn, a different speak English, but a different dialect almost.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But then to your
have you tried the Chat GPT feature where you actually talk back and forth with it?
I've tried it a little bit. Yeah, it's very much like, I'm not going to say her name because she's literally right over here, but the Amazon, Echo that I have here, so that she'll start turning on. But it's very much like that. Yeah. It's great. It's very helpful. I think, again, from a tool perspective, we have to use it because it is, we're a small production company.
Where are you using it? How do you use it in your creative process?
Well, I think the earliest entry point, and for myself, but also what I understand my colleagues using it for the most, is ChatGPT, which would be helping with scripting, ideating, concepting. Some folks are using it a little bit harder than that, but that would be I would say the singular entry point for it.
Yeah.
I have some entrepreneurial friends of mine who I've talked with extensively about how they're using it to help their businesses, to help them with marketing and positioning, any sort of general ideating, email blasts. I have a friend of mine that has really encouraged ChatGPT to write like him. And so he could feed it a few prompts and it can really spit
Have
out.
you seen how it can like review websites and provide context on websites and data? And have you uploaded stuff to it and asked it to review stuff? Have you taken it that far?
Yes. Yeah. I have, John. And because of, like I mentioned, the friends that are other entrepreneurs, the way they're pushing it in a level that I hadn't really pushed it, frankly. There's some hesitation. Certainly, I think I don't want to say I'm a purist. Surely I'm not, but I do think that there's a reality to just the fact that I can 10 times my work, or have my team working on something else while I'm working with ChatGPT, for example. And that's something that we have to just consider because, like I said, economics, we have to be more budget considerate. We have to be more aggressive, more worry about our overhead a lot more, pass those savings on.
There's two ways that it could go. It can make you output more with the same amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. Or it can make you just be, as a company, say, you know what, we just need less people. We can make the same money with less people. Which route is the is the one you looking at right now? Both probably, right?
I would say both. I mean, we're not looking at like scaling down, for example, like some of the media companies that we work with have done. It's no secret in the last several years that many media companies have been scaling back.
I guess the other way to ask that, Tommy, where my head was at was, who are the people who are going to get cut? Like, because if somebody's doing your work, then you're not needed. You need to go somewhere else in the organization. Where are those cuts mostly happen? But don't just tell me now based on what we just talked about. Where is it going to happen? Like, do you see it actually create, like, the editors, right? Are editors gone next? Are you going to be able to take 4 or 5 videos, put it in there and say from second 7 to second 15, cut it over with this audio, or pick a menacing audio? What does it do next?
Yeah, and all very valid questions and things we think about a lot and discuss a lot, John. I would say from the next 5 years, the most critical job is definitely going to be somewhere in the creative writing and like strategy sort of sector. That's where things are really accelerating to a level that I can't understate this enough. I mean, you can 10x your team. Now, there's a caveat there. You need to have that pipeline ending up with humans. You can't just feed it all there. You still need to digest and organize and curate all that data that it gives you, because there's many, many faults. That's the first one. Down the road, I would say within the next 20 years, maybe even less. And I agree really respectfully with Ben Affleck on this, because he just spoke in depth about this in some interview he did. It's the visual effects field is next. I have such a respect again for visual effects and the process and the amount of creativity and craft and just knowledge that it takes. You have so much specialties, from After Effects to Blender, Flame, 3D artists, Unreal Engine. I've so many Houdini. I mean, there's so many people that just specify in that type of software, and then they specialize in water or hair or what.
Or Fokker. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Exactly. Right. And that is the industry that's really under attack from AI right now. It's challenging to fold that level of creativity and care, I would say tradesmanship, in AI right now. There's certainly ways to spit things out, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. It's already integrated into the software in a way that helps the user. We see that with like Photoshop, for example. I can click a button and all of a sudden my entire background is gone and I have an alpha channel. That's a small step, but that's still, 5 minutes or 10 minutes it took from somebody that is less. Now, as their tasks continue to go away, it's now all of a sudden, hey, that saved me a day. Well, actually, it saved you a designer. It saved you a day from using an art director or whatever. And I think when it comes to, you mentioned editing, there certainly are tools now where you can feed it something and then it will make a video for you. I have a family album tool with my family. I'm not really on social outside of my company, but I have a very insulated family album that I share. And that annually will generate a video and put music to it and say, hey, your year in memories, which is lovely. But when it comes to the work that we do, for example, I think that there's commercial work, which you really have to interpret a lot about what the brand is trying to communicate. It's a lot of getting that right and what your ultimate goal is for the spot. So you can create pretty images, but you really have to digest some of the subtle nuance. And then what we do a lot of the times between the commercial work is we're making a lot of internal pieces as well. We're making case study tapes. We're making positioning tapes or marketing tapes or pitch reels or all sorts of internal things that executives or marketing teams need to help them win awards or position a certain campaign they want to do or whatever. And that is like, I'm sure AI can give you something, but the amount of detail and analyzing and decision making and suggesting.
Well, see, that's not the human creative aspect is going to be a hard one to. I mean, I'm sure they'll get there with things, right? Things will be able to do it. I think for a very long time, though, the people who are going to win in this space are the ones who can describe ideas very well, the ones who can articulate that, because you'll be able to, you're not going to be able to say, hey, look, AI, I need an internal marketing video for an executive. Go make it for me. And just the same way as if you had an editor, Tommy, you wouldn't be able to tell him that and expect this fabulous, fantastic. You'd have iterations. You'd have storyboarding. You'd have ideas. You'd have, cut that right here, that 5 seconds with this 5 seconds, and flip the audio and bring this up and boom. Oh, wow. Look at that. I don't think AI is going to get that, but can an AI take those instructions, right? Can it start eliminating the editors, and can it, think of it like the Tony Stark thing, right? Tony Stark was the brains behind the Jarvis thing. And he was the prompter of how to get, Jarvis would go do tasks and go figure out complex equations and stuff like that. But Jarvis wasn't, the AI wasn't actually as creative as it feels like it is. It's really not. It's the creativity comes from the human side of things, right? Knowing how to prompt, knowing how to ideate, just like you would need to know how to do that with a team of people. It takes a very specialized skill. I think those are going to be the people who have the most upside in this coming AI, transitionary phase.
Yeah.
People who could do that.
That's really insightful, but also really well put. And I have two friends of mine that consider themselves AI artists, but one of them particularly, I think, has been in this space a very, very long time, longer than I think most people understand AI as we know it today to kind of be around. But he uses it in that way. To your point, it's a task to a task to a task that he has to delegate. That's interesting, because I think communication, ultimately, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but those who know how to communicate with AI and to talk to it and to fold that into the workflow. I mean, you still have to project manage, I guess, even your AI. So there's still that part of it.
Right.
But yeah, you can communicate, prompting. There's several forums that I follow on Reddit about AI. There's a Midjourney one that's really good that people have been doing some really cool stuff with, and it's always like, what were your prompts? How did you get that through the prompting? Because
exactly. That's the key.
Right.
That's the key. And these things are starting to get advanced enough to where you can feed them data and you can tell them things to do with that data. Whether that's a PDF or, I made a slide deck for a presentation. I'm not going to say which presentation, but I made a slide deck for a presentation where, dude, I literally I procrastinated to the very end because I was like, I'm going to try to get AI to do this, right? And I'm going to rely on what AI does. So I went to ChatGPT. I said, okay, these are my bullets, create me a slide deck. Here's how, but I'm talking to it, like no typing, no nothing, just talking to it. I try to use it like that, like almost all exclusively like that. So I can get, because it's different when you type. Yeah, it's different when you type and it's different when you talk. Like, when you talk, you almost think at the speed of light. When you type, I think sometimes you internalize and think a little bit more when you're typing because you have time to go ahead. But, when we talk this out. So anyway, I talked it out and yeah, dude, I was able to get it to create a PowerPoint and it wasn't designed. But then I took it into whether it's AI design or whatever, I don't know, but a design software where you basically just toss it in there. And man, it read what was on the pages. It put relevant images. It put, relevant icons. And and within 10 minutes presentation, and it was the best presentation of the next day by orders of magnitude. Design, attention to detail, whereas everybody else's looked like a 1990s slides PowerPoint, mine looked like it, was video and backgrounds. It was amazing,
Yeah, that's impressive. I think that, that's great. That's a real win and success on your story. You mentioned decks and I think every industry has their own experiences with doing decks, but in the ad world, when you're doing decks,
it wouldn't pass the muster. No, it wouldn't pass the muster. I know ad decks, and
I think that's a thing with that is a thing with AI that I think like the Coke ad recently is a good example of that. There's a lot of discussion with the Coke ad among my community that came out where the visual effects people are going, hey, like the tires aren't spinning or something's weird with Santa's thumb or like whatever things that they're calling out. It's total trash. It would never pass the bullshit test or whatever. I can tell it's AI. And I show it to my wife and I show it to my in-laws and they're just like, oh, nice ad. So I think it's ultimately about what your audience is. If you're an agency spending tens of thousands of dollars putting a deck together, which I've seen and I'm sure you have as well, that can sometimes help you win those millions and millions of dollars pitches. But then there's other industries that it's like, I just need to get something on paper and make it look pretty good. I'm selling it to a non-creative person. They're not going to see that stuff. So let's not put our attention into that. And that's knowing your audience, knowing your deliverable, knowing what your end result is, is also really helpful. So that's
it could also be a subtle. It could be Coca-Cola's subtle way of saying, we did this with AI and the people who are going to know will know and the people who don't care won't care. And that's the point.
Yeah. The discussion that has developed, particularly around the Coke ad among my community, as well as I think is a really important community, is again, like what is the level of caliber of of quality of work that people care about. And we can all go, back in my day, that never would have passed. And maybe I'll agree with you and I'll say, hey, that doesn't look that great. But ultimately, at the end of the day, is the fact that the tire is not spinning, selling more bottles of Coke. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it matters ultimately. Right. And that's where the economics comes into play. That's where we all have to be honest with ourselves and say, okay, what are the economics telling us in this? And I don't want to contribute to worse work in the industry. I want to have standards. I'd like to win awards. Certainly, I want to be respected by my community and my colleagues. However, I have a business to run, and I have, other businesses are doing. Not only are other businesses doing this, but brands are accepting this and encouraging it, and that's what I think the Coke ad has really showed us. And then I realized that even like earlier than that, Toys R Us had done an AI generated ad, so it's already out there. It's already happening. It's a matter of, like I said, economics at this point, But you're right. We have to learn to communicate with these tools, and I encourage my team to learn to communicate with these tools as well. For me, it's not about necessarily, like I mentioned, scaling down. We're a very small team, but expanding wise, I just constantly every year the budgets are either stagnating or they're going down, and things are going up, costs are going up, salaries are going up, healthcare expenses, everything are going up around us. Not to mention energy costs more, and power and machines. I got to get new equipment, all sorts of things like that. If that can save someone's job or make us more,
let them do 10x more. Yeah. Let them do 10x more, and you don't have to worry about the wheel spinning, right?
Correct.
Go move on. Yeah. Get the 80-20 rule going.
Right. We also, I think, there's a lot more pressure as both individuals, but also as companies, to be more present. I've certainly found this a lot. I mentioned earlier, I'm not on social media personally, but I have to be for my business.
Yeah, you have to be.
And when you're on social media, and just in general, you have to have a presence, and that requires labor and work. And so if I can have an editor or myself doing a paying job and also doing a non-paying job, because I have to put out work, I have to put out cuts or BTS or make social content or whatever, then I don't have to hire a social media person. I can leverage AI to do that. So there's a lot more demand internally versus externally versus economics. It's very complicated, but I think that in some ways, I of course would wish that we could all just get lots of good paying jobs and good budgets and all that other stuff. Maybe go back to the 90s before I was really professionally in the market, but ultimately, I'm appreciative that I can be of a young, small company and as competitive, and I would argue as competitive as a lot of the bigger companies. I have executed projects that I'm very proud of that I know would have costed a lot more money, and they would have gotten equal, if not maybe potentially lesser work if they had gone to maybe a higher end facility. So I'm appreciative of that perspective as well.
So talk to me a little bit about your day job. We've talked a lot about how it's changing with AI, but talk to us a little bit about your day job. You've done some really cool, really high profile content and work. So how did you get into that? What was the catalyst that got you into that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. We mentioned earlier the starting out from an analog perspective. So I jumped into the industry basically as soon as we went to cards. It was moving off tape and moving into cards. So I got my break in the industry already pretty early on with using a lot of technology. But
what do you mean move into cards? What cards?
So like the Sony P2 cards, like now there's Red uses cards in the camera, like your cameras.
Okay, got it. You mean in cameras? Yeah,
there used to be tapes, right? There used to be tape. First it was film, then it was big tapes or whatever.
My mind was on like tapes in server rooms for storing data. Sorry, my mind went somewhere else completely differently. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
No, all good. So there was a lot to figure out with that sort of workflow and how cards would work with post and all that. So I was really fortunate to kind of be at the ground level when I was still in college, and then my first year out was really in this world that was still trying to figure out how this digital workflow worked. And a lot of the production companies, even the more like mature marquee ones, were going to colleges and younger generations to try to help them figure it out. So I started working on commercials pretty young. I was still in college as a DIT, a technician, and loading and logging. I saw a real opportunity.
Like commercials, like for money. You're building them for money.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I was in college. I was in the city at the time. I went to school of visual arts. I went for a bachelor in fine arts, specifically in film editing. So I knew I wanted to be in the post side. And I had a friend of mine that was PAing on this one job, and he put me in contact with the production manager, and they're like, hey, they got this commercial they're shooting. I think at the time it was for like L'Oreal or something, and they need somebody who can manage this post work.
Very cool.
Set. And so it was great, man. I think I got paid like $750 each day, and it was like 4 days of work. It was the most money I'd ever seen in a short amount of time. I was like, this is magic. This is amazing. So after that, I mean, I was, not only do you see the you see the production and all that, but I realized that there was a need for that post kind of understanding within commercial work. So I got pretty fortunate with that gig. But nevertheless, I really was trying to pursue feature film work. And I realized pretty quickly after about a year internship somewhere, I interned at Postworks, or Orbit Digital Postworks, which did like beautiful, really amazing features. So they were like a 4-wall edit suite that Chicago came in and they cut that there. They cut one of the, I think Harry Potter movies was cut there. Blindside was cut there. It was really, really cool facility. But the path to becoming an editor is like, there wasn't a very clear path for me, and loans were mounting. So I jumped into an internship at a really small post-production company called Beehive. This was about 2010. I got an internship there and I got hired right away. And I was doing shooting, I was cutting. It was a very small boutique company, and they kind of primarily specialized in design and branding. So I got a real crash course experience in graphics and cutting with graphics, but very much like touching all points of production. And after about 3 years there, they scaled down. They're not officially closed, but they closed up their offices and scaled down. And then I went freelance. And when I was a freelancer, I loved it. Was great. I mean, I met so many people. I worked on, like network stuff. I worked on agency stuff. I worked on fashion stuff. I got very fortunate to work with some really great, high profile projects. I got hired to work on the visual album for Beyonce's first visual album, and bunked up there for 6 months. And then from there, I jumped to a project with U2, which was really fun. And then I was just sort of touching.
Did you get to meet Queen Bee?
Yeah. We worked very closely for 6 months. It was a really neat experience. And she was in and out of the office a bunch, but definitely a very, very interesting experience.
What was the most interesting experience you had while you were working with the Queen Bee?
There's a level of creative demand that is of a intensity that I have never experienced before and never experienced since. And there's always been a lot of demand for really good creative, but it's not just with her, it's with the entire team. Now, things have definitely rolled over. I know some of the folks still over there, but there's been a lot of changeover. So a lot has changed. She's since moved.
But that's also a culture, though, don't you think? I mean, isn't that a culture thing?
Well, that's what I mean.
Probably still there in her organization.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think it's still there. It was a little scrappier than what I understand it is now. I think it's a little bit more robust. Now she's moved to LA and has, I think, a whole building she owns there now, I think. But it was very intense, John. It was just super, super intense. And you didn't have a lot of time to work things through. If stuff wasn't like, if you weren't delivering and performing even things that were a snippet of a potential good idea, it was, see, you're out.
Do you feel like you guys got great work done there in those conditions?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly think that there's something to be said for that kind of intensity in that environment. I mean, it was really much like, here you go. I think I was 25 or 26 years old. I was probably way too young to be in that position, honestly. And I didn't really have a total appreciation for and maybe that also helped because I just sat down and did my job. It was just like, I mean, I remember one occurrence, I got 350 terabytes or something of like footage from her being on tour, and it was like they were trying to
make a video now.
Kinda. I mean, it was like they were mining ideas through. I mean, they interviewed and shot everything, right? They shot the performers on stage, the sound.
Talking behind the scenes, everything, yeah.
But all the people it's a city that takes to put shows like that on. So a lot of it was like, I have this idea. We want to do a little bio piece on Terry, the stage manager, which is on my portfolio. But it was very much like, here's 350 terabytes of footage. Go find the story of Terry, and then we'll check back in with you in about 6 hours and see your progress. I mean, that's literally like the conditions. So, if you did a pretty decent job, if you knew how to manage your time, you could do pretty well. So that sort of like couple a day project, I was back and forth for a little while, and eventually she was working on laddering up the visual campaign and was doing some TVC stuff. I had some experience in TVC work, so that they were like, "What are you doing for the next 6 months?" I jokingly said, "I'm working here," and they're like, "Yes, you are," and that was kind of the end of that. But yeah, after that, we broke off, and I ended up freelancing a lot more long form stuff. I kind of got into reality a little bit, which was really not for me. I did not like working on reality television. But
why?
Also, it's just
too fake to be recalled reality.
Yeah, I think I have all the respect in the world for the seasoned editors that do that work. I met people who are so talented at what they do. But it is a type of content that I just don't understand. And it's just not right for me. My wife watches it, it's not for me. So I kind of jumped back into fashion stuff. I was doing a lot of fashion work, a lot of pitch work. And eventually I moved over to the producing side. And after meeting an old friend of mine that had moved into LG was building out an in-house agency. I partnered with him for a few months, and then it was like, let's go, I don't want to be in-house anymore. I want to be the vendor. I want to not hire production companies. I want to be the production company. So that happened rather quickly. And within that time, I had been starting to kind of work with an in-house agency called Velocity, which is now Paramount Brand Studio. They service Paramount. They do a lot of integrated marketing campaigns and custom branded content work. An executive producer I had worked with, who was my client, was let go at that time. She called me up. I said, let's just do this from the other direction. You have the experience and the knowledge. So she joined up. She's the executive creative director of Stuck in Motion. And we really went after a network work, particularly because there's so much different variety, and that was very exciting. So we'll do a promo, an internal tape, branded content, what have you. The higher profile projects really revolve around the tentpoles that Paramount does. So that would be like the VMAs or the Grammys. It's usually in partnership with a brand, and they're very exciting. I get that intensity back, John, that I really miss. I can't live in that world all the time. It's too stressful. But for about a month or month and a half, the VMAs was...
So the intensity is kind of like the same type of Beyonce intensity that you're talking about, similar?
Correct. Yeah. There's very high levels of demand of creative. There's a lot of attention in it. There's a lot of dollars riding around.
But look at the work. I mean, look at the work that gets creative out of it. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing work.
It's great. I appreciate you saying that. But we are part of an entire machine
Sure.
An entire execution. We create a 75-second, little film or some social content, which is really important and a staple for that campaign. But when you see the breadth of the campaign that's going on, the temple, the pop-ups, all the activations they do, it's cool to be part of such a big event and a big marketing campaign. That's just, I love that energy. Is just everybody's got to step up, everybody's got to do a good job.
Yeah, because it's all got to hit at the same time, right? Like if one thing doesn't hit, the whole domino of shit happening behind it can't happen. So yeah, it's super important.
Right. And
it's all time crunch and
control eyeballs. You got the CMOs of every company looking at your work, sometimes the CEOs. So Burger King CMOs are,
and when the VMAs are going to be, right? So you got to be done. You don't get to say we need another week, we need another 2 weeks. It's got to be done.
Right. And that sort of level of pressure from a high profile project is exciting. But to the timeline thing, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's kind of our specialty, which has been both a blessing and a curse. But almost everything that comes across our desk is time of essence. We needed it yesterday. So I've really created a niche for myself.
Well, that's why they have that's why the SEAL team exists.
Yeah, right.
For that purpose right there.
We would be the SEAL Team 6. Yeah, when you kind of either exhausted other resources or it has to get done. There's just as importantly, the VMAs are going to air, but also an executive meeting is going to happen, and you have to have, can't move, and the work has to be good as well, So I love that intensity. I love that camaraderie when everybody's pushing for a singular objective and killing it.
So do you do this as your own company right now? You're hired out, or how's that? Or are you working at?
Yeah, so I'm the owner operator of the company, which means that not only do I own it, but I also operate on the ground level as well. That may change, one day. That should always be the goal of any business owner, is to have a self-sustaining operation. So that's eventually where I'd like to get to down the road, just so it's bigger than myself. But yes, I still edit from time to time. I project manage, I creative lead, I do a lot, I wear a lot of hats.
We try to do some cool videos from time to time. I know you're probably expensive, but you never know when something could align.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I'm in this realm right now, and John, let's talk about creative first, and we'll let the dollars follow second. So
sounds good, man. Well, it was great meeting you, Tommy. We'll talk soon.
Have
a good one.
Good chatting. See you, John.